So welcome everybody to Face 2026, the first of many virtual sessions that we are hosting this week to kick off the conference. We're so glad that you can all be here with us um, for our keynote kickoff with Erin Harkey from Americans for the Arts. Before we get started, just a few things. First, allow me to introduce myself for those who haven't met. My name is Kinsey Keck. I use she, her pronouns. I am the programs director here at the New York City Arts and Education Roundtable. I am a white woman with brown, sort of wavy chin length hair that's parted down the center, and I'm wearing some large, round, wire framed glasses and a kind of army green long sleeve shirt, and I am in front of a blurred background. And I'm very excited to have you all here to kick off Face to Face 2026. So first, I do want to say and extend a very big thank you to conference sponsors for Face to Face this year, who have made the conference possible. This session specifically, our keynote kickoff, is brought to you by two of our sponsors that with their logos on the screen now. They are Surface Impression and Adobe. So a really big thank you to them both for making this possible, but also to all of our conference sponsors who allow us to put on such hopefully rich, impactful programming each year. So very big thank you to them. All of our sponsors do have profiles where you can learn more about them on the Face to Face website, and I'm going to ask Kim, if she hasn't already, to put that link in the chat. Thank you so much, Kim. I appreciate it. And while we are doing thank yous, I also want to acknowledge and extend so much gratitude to the Face to Face 2026 conference committee, who put so much work and thought into curating this conference each year. So I'm very grateful to work with them and to be able to bring this program to you alongside them. So thank you so much to our conference committee. I am going to stop sharing for a moment while we go through some reminders. So first, if you're having any trouble with Zoom while you're here with us, please just send me a private message. My name is Kinsey, and I will be keeping my eye on the chat. You can also message any of my colleagues who it appears are all here right now. Kim Olson, Alex Latore, Diana Crum. I'm volunteering you all to help with folks if they need it in the chat. Please do remember to keep your mic on mute unless you're the person speaking, just so we can all hear each other clearly. We do encourage you to use the chat to connect with others on the call, share your questions, which we will be collecting because we'll have plenty of time for Q&A today. So please do put your questions there. Please also take this opportunity, if you haven't already, to introduce yourself in the chat and say where you're calling in from. We're so glad to have you all here. As you can see, we do have live ASL interpretation on today's call and for all of the virtual conference offerings. We also have automated Zoom captioning available as well for anyone who would like to use it. You can go to captions on your toolbar or under the more section of your toolbar and click show captions, and that should have you all set there. This session is being recorded. It will be made available to registrants after the conclusion of the face-to-face conference. So look for that in an email from me with all other resources and things from the conference. I think that's enough from me now. I'd really love to introduce, and let me make sure that I can spotlight here accordingly. So we're going to open the conference with a song that has been shared with us. And to introduce that song, I'm going to bring on Hinu Josephine Tarrant. Let me just spotlight you so we could see you, and I'd love to pass the mic to you.
Oh, hi everybody. I'm really honored to be invited here by Kinsey and Kimberly for the face-to-face New York City Roundtable. Education in the Arts conference. So I just want to say thank you very much for inviting me here to open up this session for you here today online. I am Indigenous. My name is Hinu Josephine Tarrant, which means firstborn daughter, Josephine Tarrant. I come from the Ho-Chunk, Hopi, Kuna, and Rappahannock nations. Oh, can you not hear? Yeah? Okay. I'm a third generation New Yorker or New Jerseyite. Right now I live out in Lenape-Hoking, and I could see a lot of that is in the comments out in New Jersey. And yeah, I'm very happy to open this here today with the song called Good Feather. And this was written and composed by my late father, Kevin Tarrant, who was the lead singer of Silver Cloud Singers, which was the local New York City, I guess, traditional powwow drum based out here within New York City. And yeah, I'm very happy to participate in this. I know a few other, I also have a background in theater. I'm also the managing director and lead line producer for Safe Harbors New York City, which is a company in residence based out of New York Theater Workshop, and once was an Indigenous initiative over at La Mama. So, you know, I love being with my theater people, love being here, and it's great to open this up. I just want to give a little bit of background for this song that I am sharing that's going to be up here shortly. Good Feather was written by my father, Kevin Tarrant, in honor of my late uncle, Kenny Tarrant. And I come from a legacy on both sides of my family, from my mother and my father, of traditional song keepers, traditional dancers, but also theater makers and theater creators. And we have been in show business on both sides of my lineage since literally Buffalo Bill, if probably not earlier than that. So we come from a long legacy of that. And so I was really happy to share this today because my uncle was the patriarch of that side of my family, and you know, we have a lot of pain attached to that. And now with my father being gone, there's a lot of pain attached to that as well. But I think for people who are, you know, to open this with this, it's really to send you all off in a good way, you know. I think that we'll meet each other in this conference, and you'll have discussions during this conference, and you'll get to know each other, and then you'll turn off the Zoom, and then everyone lives the rest of their day. And so the reason that I shared this particular song is so that there is that prayer over you for the rest of your day to have a good day and to continue to have a good life even after this conference. And that's really, even though it's opening, it's really to send you home with. So that's a little bit of background on this particular song. It is an honor song written for my uncle, or composed and sung for my uncle. But like I said, coming from my own legacy, and when we're talking about education, I think that is what that's about, is that legacy. And so it doesn't end with us as artists, whether you're a traditional song keeper or a regular theater maker or playwright or whatever your role is in teaching playwriting, teaching acting, dance, music, anything, that legacy continues. And that's really what this song, I feel, is exemplifies, because my uncle has been gone for well over 30 years, and my father wrote this song 7 years ago in his honor. So, you know, those legacies live on in us, and that's really why I wanted to share this with you all today. And I thank you for inviting me, and I hope you enjoy it. And I'll be here hanging out a little bit after for a little bit of the beginning of the conference. And thank you all again. Well, hey, hi, Well, hey, hi, ya. Well, hey, hi, ya. Oh, yeah, oh, well, hey, 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 hi, ya. Hey, hi, ya. Well, hey, ya. Well, hey, hi, ya. Well, hey, hi, ya. Hey, ya. Oh, well, hey. Well, hey, hi, ya. Well, hey, hi, ya. Oh, yeah, oh, well, hey, oh. Well, hey, hi, well, well, hey, hi, well, oh, yeah, hey, well, hey, hi, well, oh, yeah, well, hey, oh. Sorry, my daughter's here, but thank you all. Really appreciate that, and I hope you all have good feelings with that. I can carry that with you for the extension of your conference here. It's really important work that everybody's doing. I'm like such a believer in theater, and I don't even want to get on my soapbox, but I really am, and I think the work that you all are doing is so important. So, really, thank you for having me, and I hope you have a great conference.
Thank you so much. That was so beautiful and such a meditative and powerful way to begin the conference. And please do not apologizing for having a young human in your space. That's what we all do our work for, is to bring arts together and to bring young people into the art we do. Um, my name is Amy Harris. I am a white woman with shoulder-length brown hair, red framed glasses, and a blue shirt with puffy sleeves. Behind me is a white wall and the bottom corner of a red painting. On behalf of the Roundtable staff and conference co-chairs myself, Dr. Shobha Kavanakudiel, and Alexandra Lopez, letting the ASL interpreter catch up. Great, thank you. I'd like to welcome you to our kickoff event for Face to Face 26. In prepping for today, I'm reminded of a moment that happened to me earlier this winter. I was in my hometown of Minneapolis and attended a bystander training. The facilitator started the workshop by explaining no one was coming to save us, so we needed to save us. She moved into a call and response where she asked, "Who saves us?" And the large, multiple generational crowd responded forcibly, "We save us." It was a powerful reminder of the power of community. Dr. Darrell Cooper, a former conference co-chair, once told me that he thought of Face to Face as a family reunion. I love that. Along with the Roundtable's Day of Learning, it is an opportunity for us to share space and visit with colleagues we frequently only see in passing. So as we enter the next 2 weeks, I hope that you will not only take away tools that you can use in your day-to-day practice, but also connect and reconnect and introduce yourself to others as we collectively reaffirm that our work is not a zero-sum game. Through partnerships, collaborations, and information sharing, we can continue to do the important work of expanding art making and arts education, which is vital to maintaining joy and humanity for ourselves and within our community. And that is the perfect segue for me to introduce today's keynote speaker, Erin Harkey. A link to Erin's bio can be found in the chat, but briefly, she has worked from coast to coast in the arts and policy space, assuming her position as CEO at Americans for the Arts in early 2025. We are delighted that she can be with us this afternoon, so without further ado, Erin Harkey.
Thank you, Amy. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so glad to be here with you and kick off what I know will be an important 2 weeks of conversation, reflection, and connection. I also want to say thanks to the team at Arts Education Roundtable. Thank you for creating this space, and thank you to all of you for showing up. I don't think we should pretend that this is an easy moment to be doing this work. There's a lot coming at us right now, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of pressure, and in some cases, very real risk. And still, you are here, still doing the work, still showing up for your students, your organizations, your communities. So thank you. At Americans for the Arts, we talk a lot about how the arts are essential. And I know that that can sound like a line, but for us, it's actually how we make decisions. We see the arts as infrastructure, not extra, not enrichment, not something you get to once everything else gets figured out, but something that sits at the center of how people learn, how communities function, how we understand ourselves and each other. And I know I don't have to convince the folks in this room about that. You're living it every day. But this moment certainly feels different, and I want to name that more directly. Because this isn't just about the sort of usual challenges that we're all accustomed to, the funding cycles, the program design, the audience engagement. This is a full pressure moment, and one of the most consequential moments for the arts in our nation's history, where policy, politics, culture, and public perception are all intersecting in ways that are impacting the work we do in very real time. You're seeing it in your classrooms, you're seeing it in your budgets, you're seeing it in what feels possible and in having to contend with the unthinkable. For me, this work has always been personal. I came up through arts education programs, piano lessons, cello lessons, school programs that gave me access to the full world. And I still think about that, how those early experiences started to shape how I saw myself and what I would ultimately dedicate my life and career to. Not just what I could do, but where I belonged, where I found my deepest purpose. And I think, most of us have some version of that story. A teacher, a program, a moment that opened something up. I've spent nearly 2 decades working in the arts, first in Los Angeles, and then later during nearly 8 years leading Chicago's Department of Cultural Affairs. And today, of course, I'm honored to serve as the CEO of Americans for the Arts. Our mission at AFTA, as our friends call us, is as the largest advocacy organization in the country, is to build recognition and support for the extraordinary and dynamic value of the arts by leading, serving, and advancing the diverse networks of organizations and individuals who cultivate creativity across America. What we're focused on right now is really 3 things, First, protecting and advancing funding for the arts at the federal, state, and local levels, because we know funding is not just about programs, it's about stability, it's about whether organizations can exist at all. And public funding for the arts remains the most equitable way of funding the arts in America. Secondly, we want to support the people who make this field possible. That means arts workers, teaching artists, administrators, people who are often underpaid, overextended, and still show up with everything that they have. And lastly, reframing the role of the arts in public life, not as something that is a luxury, but something that is a necessity to education, to community health, and to democracy itself. If we don't define the value of this work, then somebody else will. And a major part of that work is about protecting and expanding arts education, something I know is core to everyone here today. And we say arts education, we're not just talking about K through 12, we're also talking about higher education, which has some very acute challenges where so many artists, educators, and cultural workers are trained and shaped. The data is clear. 92% of Americans believe arts education is important, and yet more than 2 million students still don't have access. That gap is real. And it's why at AFTA, we helped launch the National Arts and Education Week, a moment to recognize and advocate for every student's right to arts education, no matter their zip code or family income. We also offer resources to educators, parents, students, and administrators to help strengthen arts education in schools and beyond. And we're working to build a community where arts educators can connect, share, and learn from one another. But like I said, this is an extremely challenging moment. And there are real questions coming up again and again. What's changing in policy and funding? What does that mean for organizations, for classrooms, for students? And how do we keep moving forward in the middle of it all? If you've been asking those questions, you're not alone. We're hearing the same things every day at Americans for the Arts, and we're navigating a lot right now. We're, of course, seeing increased pressure on cultural institutions, from national organizations like the Smithsonian and the Kennedy Center to smaller local organizations. We're seeing shifts in what content is supported and made available. And we're seeing a pullback in funding that is hitting small and mid-sized organizations especially hard, particularly in rural and other under-resourced communities. Audience behaviors are shifting, costs are going up, margins are tight, and all of that is happening in a broader environment that feels more divided and more scrutinized than it has been in a long time. And all of that is real, it's scary, it's hard, it's disappointing, and it's frustrating. Arts education is increasingly, right, sitting at the middle of all of those tensions. So let's just say it plainly, right? The arts are under attack, and that's not accidental. The arts ask people to think, to question, to see things from a different perspective, to imagine something beyond what already exists. That's powerful. The arts have power. So the question becomes, what do we do with that? How do we respond, not just react in this moment? Because there's a lot in front of us, but there's also real opportunity ahead. This is our moment, a moment to be clearer, more aligned, more visible in how we talk about the value of this work and why it matters. The arts are about expression, they're about connection, they're about people understanding each other. And that matters in communities and how we function as a country. We're also seeing some real progress, and we need to be able to celebrate the wins. Our collective advocacy helped secure $207 million in funding for the NEA and the NEH after budgets for these organizations were initially zeroed out. That was a bipartisan win that confirmed that the arts are something that we all believe in. Partners across the field have pushed back on some of the more extreme measures that we've seen, including in the courts, and they have won. Those things matter too. They show that this work is making a difference. I also want to be clear that there's real movement happening on the policy side. We're seeing momentum around arts education in ways that also matter. There's a Senate introduction in the Arts and Education for All Act, the most comprehensive piece of arts education legislation that we've seen. We're also seeing progress around arts education at HBCUs with potential Senate introduction of the HBCU Arts Act, making sure these institutions can access the resources they need to support future leaders and preserve cultural assets, something that is very close to my heart as a Howard University grad. There are also more targeted efforts like the Reimagining Inclusive Arts Education Act, which focuses on professional development for teachers so they can better support students. And alongside that, there's the ongoing work to protect funding for a well-rounded education under federal law and making sure those programs are funded at levels needed to reach students across the country. Because just as important as what gets passed is how funding moves. And we're also paying close attention to how funds are being administered, especially with recent shifts moving some arts education funding from the Department of Ed to the Department of Labor, because access to funding only matters if it reaches the people and programs it's intended to support. All of this is to say that the work is active and ongoing. There are real opportunities right now to shape what arts education looks like going forward, but it requires your attention, it requires coordination, and it requires all of us staying engaged in the process. We have to keep pushing for funding, for access, and for policies that support our work. And we have to make sure that it reaches communities of all sizes and places, not just a few. So how do we do that? First, we need to get more comfortable telling our story clearly, directly, unapologetically, and not just to each other, to policymakers, to funders, to the public. We have to say what this work actually is. The arts are jobs, they are economic drivers, they are education, they are mental health supports, they are community infrastructure. The more consistently we say that, the harder it is to dismiss or reduce the work to something that is optional. Second, we have to move from isolation to alignment. This field does incredible work, but often separately. Different organizations, different priorities, different communities. But the challenges we're dealing with right now, they're shared across our field and across allied sectors that also want better for this country. There's strength in being more coordinated, in showing up as a collective voice and united for the public good. Third, we have to think beyond survival. The field has been operating in scarcity for a long time, stretching resources, making things work, but that's not sustainable, and that mindset isn't going to get us there. We need long-term investment, and we need to invest in people, not just programs. Because if the people doing this work can't stay in it, then the work itself doesn't get done. And finally, we have to protect space for creativity, especially for our young people. Arts education is where students process the world, where they build confidence, identity, voice. And right now, that kind of space is critical. All of this is happening as the country approaches its 250th anniversary. Moments like that aren't just about celebration, they're about stories. Who gets included, who gets seen, what gets remembered, and that's where the arts come in. Artists, educators, and cultural workers don't just reflect history, we expand it, we challenge it, we make space for the full story. So I've covered a lot, and a lot of it is hard, but what keeps me grounded in this work is the people, the creativity, the consistency of what's happening every day in the arts. It's not just about the big conversations, it's about the teaching artist who finds a way to reach a student no one else can reach. The small organization that becomes a steady presence in its community. The administrator who keeps things moving forward even when resources are tight. The student who discovers their voice for the first time. That's the work. And that's what I think about, especially right now. Those moments don't always get attention, but they are the foundation of everything, literally everything. So just know this. The work that you're doing is seen, it matters, and it's part of something bigger than any one moment. There is real strength in what we do, and there is clarity in what we know to be true. The arts are not a luxury. They're not secondary. They are essential. So please take this time while you're here in community with one another to connect, to share what's working, to be honest about what's hard, and to remind yourselves of why you started doing this in the first place. You're not doing it alone. So thank you so much for being here, and thank you for the work that you do every day.
I just want to say thank you, Erin. Thank you so much for, I think, touching on what we all are feeling right now. So it's just really validating and important to have this conversation. There we are. Now we're both together and we have Allie. I hope you can see all of the love and appreciation that is already going off in the chat as well. And folks, we are going to have plenty of time for questions and to continue this conversation. So I invite you to, if you have a question that you would like to make into this space, please share it in the chat. You're also welcome to raise your hand, virtual or real, and we will get you spotlit so you can ask your question live. I thought I saw a hand, but I could be mistaken. I see Amy Harris. Okay, I'm going to add a spotlight here. Hi, Amy.
Great. I'll kick us off with a question. I'm curious specifically concerning the NEA. I was delighted to see that both the NEA and the NEH were refunded. In looking at the guidelines, they're more narrow than they used to be in some ways. They're looking for very specific projects. And I'm wondering if we, in the near future, might see an expansion so that people who were getting money to like create a piece of art or something that was a little more less attuned to the specific guidelines that we see now and more to just like the idea of creating art or creating arts education or being in community, if we will revert back to that anytime soon or if we're looking at the more narrow guidelines for the foreseeable future.
Well, thanks for that question. I would say that probably for the duration of this administration, that I would anticipate that the guidelines for the types of projects that would be funded are going to be more prescriptive rather than less. But I think it's important that people continue to apply to this agency and continue to engage. And I think it's important that we continue to sort of monitor, right? I think where resources are going, these are public resources, and what this agency funds should reflect the full breadth and diversity and scope of creativity in America. And so it's our sort of responsibility to, I think, track, right, and to really make a case for how those dollars are being spent. Does that answer your question?
It does. Can I follow up with one corollary or one addition, which is just that I know that the courts have been going back and forth about whether or not we have to assert that we do not have any DEI programming. While that's still in flux, have you heard or do you have any recommendation for people who do not want to sign up for that, but may be offered funding? Will the money be pulled back if the organizations don't and the courts go the other way with their decision?
I don't have an answer for that, I think, at the moment. So I think my best guidance would be to continue to do the programs that you're wanting to do. I think every organization is going to have to make their own calculation based on, their priorities and their board and all of those other things in terms of whether or not they're going to accept the funding.
Thank you.
I can go next, and then I see a great question in the chat, which we can uplift right after. Erin, what you said around storytelling very much resonates as our collective community here in New York City, the general area, is working to advocate for more robust access to arts education, for more robust supports for our workforce. And I guess sort of a two-part question. I'm curious if you have examples of really successful storytelling that you've seen in terms of making a compelling case for arts and culture, for arts education. And a second part to that is also we know the importance of coalition building, that we're stronger together. And while we tend to be a really great echo chamber within our field, we need to be able to reach out to other parts of our community. And so a part two to that is, where do you see sectors or aligned industries? Like, where are you all looking at Americans for the Arts as maybe a cue for fellow advocates here in New York City?
Well, I'll just sort of second that storytelling is really important. I think one of the things that we ran into and are running into in terms of advocacy is that, like, traditional advocacy, the letter to your congressman and, those sorts of tactics are not having the kind of resonance that they typically do. And what is more impactful is the sort of one-on-one personal story. Just before the Appropriations Committee voted on the NEA and NEH allocations, we had a number of advocates fly in to the Hill, and it was like very, very timely because they were, in appropriators' offices, reminding folks of how these dollars impacted direct constituents and constituencies, and in some cases, right, these were organizations that had NEA and NEH grants canceled, right? So it's important for people to see that these dollars have real impact, and when they're not there, that they have real consequences for people. One of the things that I'm really excited about is that we're going to be working on a national arts advocacy initiative where we're going to be sort of documenting and assessing the different types and networks of advocacy in the country, from big organizations like Americans for the Arts to grassroots efforts to increase local funding and support and infrastructure for the arts, and really thinking about the sort of interconnected networks. But part of that work is also looking at sort of allied sectors that we can learn from in terms of how they have advocated. And certainly, right, there's a lot of things to be learned. We talk a lot about sort of domestic workers' rights as a particular movement to look for that are aligned in terms of the types of social and safety net and sort of gig worker supports that are required. So sort of thinking outside of the sort of traditional arts and culture box to look at how people have advanced, causes in other areas is something that we're going to look at.
I think this then dovetails well into a question I see from Corey in the chat. In a system that's built to fund programs, how do we advocate for and build models that center people and relationships instead?
I think that's a real challenge. And I think, it's not that it's fundamentally broken, but the entire infrastructure is really based on sort of funding to organizations and then hoping that that organizational money then is dispersed to creatives, right, or to artists. And that's the lion's share of the infrastructure in this country. I think during COVID, I was running the Department of Cultural Affairs at the time, and one of the aha moments was, all of these organizations are actually shuttered. We don't have any way to get to people. So we only had the infrastructure to fund organizations, but they were not operational. So we didn't know how to actually get to the people that were now, unemployed and very precarious sort of financial situations. I think that this is an area of work that we all need to be deeply focused on, and that, cultural policy going forward in this country should really center individuals and not rely so heavily on this sort of organizational network frame.
Erin, Corey, who had shared that first question in the chat, also shared a follow-up that said, oh, and what have you seen work when trying to shift funders' thinking from supporting programs to supporting the people and ecosystems that sustain the arts?
Well, I think there's a lot of good work. I think New York certainly did a lot of work with Creatives Rebuild New York that, we're continuing to learn from. A lot of good folks in, Minnesota at Springboard for the Arts are doing really good work around guaranteed income. But I think thinking about, systems of, again, social safety net, other things that we need to be thinking about to support artists and creatives as full, whole people, not just sort of their creative work, but what they need to live thriving, whole lives, right? And that's also, I think, where some of the allied work is, right? Because, we have unique circumstances, but some of the circumstances are just things that everybody needs access to: affordable housing, affordable healthcare, transportation, right? And we can build solidarity across other movements that are working on that as well.
I see also, as you were speaking of a few things, Kim put those links in the chat, so I wanted to uplift that for folks to grab those. I'll collect them as well. And a side note, in terms of resources, including the recording of this, there was a question in the chat about the recording. So I just want to uplift again that we are recording now, and this will be shared along with any other recordings once the conference concludes. And now I see Gully has a hand up. So let me get you center stage here, and please take it away.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Erin. That was a superb update and overview, and despite all the uncertainty and the risk, very reassuring. So a tip of the hat to you at Americans for the Arts, hanging in there for securing the commitment to the appropriation, regardless of where it goes, and the upcoming legislation. I had two questions. Well, I had one question. I'll come back to it if I may later, but I'd like to pick up on this whole issue of recognizing the need to invest in our workforce. There have been some very sobering reports for the Center for an Urban Future, and actually also from the Arts and Education Roundtable, particularly the precarity of employment for teaching artists. And we are looking at some things through New Yorkers for Culture and Arts, but I had a specific question for you. This probably predates most of the people on this call, but back in the 1970s and 80s, we had the Comprehensive Employment and Training Act, a federal employment act based on the Works Progress Administration, quite honestly, back in the 1930s. And we are hitting this crisis, not just in the creative industries, but in all the industries where people are being forced more and more into freelancing, where there is no guarantee of the next paycheck, and also, even more importantly, as you alluded to, affordable housing, affordable healthcare, portable benefits, and so forth. Do you hear in Washington that there is any talk of another program like CETA, the Comprehensive Employment and Training Act? And do you think this is something we should really be focusing on? We have at least one senator in New York who actually introduced a bill during the pandemic, Senator Fahey, which would have created such a program, and it included the arts sector, the creative individuals. Is this something that you think might have any traction?
I think for sure. I mean, I think you to the, list of things that you just named, you add sort of technology disruption, AI, and the what that's going to do not only for the creative workforce, but for, work in this work, the nature of work in general. So I have heard about, sort of thinking about training related to that specifically, but I think, certainly a broader, more comprehensive look at the future of creative work, right? And how we can get, folks prepared for that is always, I think, a worthwhile conversation.
Well, I would love to, participate in that. I think there may be, we have to steer between the Scylla and Charybdis of the New York State Education Department and the New York State Council on the Arts, and of course in the city you have cultural affairs. But I think there's room for a revenue stream that invests in individual artists. Now, the question I was going to ask, you alluded in your introduction to challenges for arts education in higher education. And this resonates, particularly as the New York regents are changing their graduation measures to a portrait of the artist and are focusing on arts education as a key element in that. Could you expand a little on the challenges, and if you know of any great examples of preschool through lifelong learning, P20 aligned programs in the country share that with us, because I think we've got an educational house somewhat divided against itself, and it would be great to know of models where there is good alignment on into post-secondary.
Well, this is an issue I think I'm getting smarter about. We were recently approached by a group of advocates representing arts schools and arts programs about some, I think, issues around sort of student loan programs and new guidelines that were put into effect through the sort of big, beautiful bill, and what ultimately will qualify for, what programs would ultimately qualify for student loan, sort of based on sort of income after school. So you needed to be making a certain amount of money in order to qualify for scholarships through the federal government, which of course puts art students in a precarious position because there's a longer sort of lead time in terms of when we might be, fully sort of able to make that sort of income threshold. What that means for art schools is that, we're worried that there will be universities that will decide that, arts programs are not worth the risk. That obviously presents challenges for the education of our workforce. It certainly presents challenges for artists that are also teaching artists at, higher education institutions. It has, potentially a really crippling effect on the entire sort of creative workforce. So I think we're trying to understand, I think, changes to student loan requirements at higher ed, just to make sure that, there continues to be resources for our young people to be educated. So emerging, I think, area of focus for us. I don't know that I have, a gazillion models, I think, to talk about, except that I, live in Chicago. Certainly a couple weeks ago, one of our museums on one of our art university campuses, art museums on university campuses, sort of closed, right? And that left a, significant void, right, in terms of a community resource not only just for students, but for the entire sort of community. So I think our inability to really figure this out and to, direct some sort of considerable attention to making sure that arts education, that the education of our workforce on, higher institution campuses continues to remain strong.
Thank you, Erin. Thank you for these great questions, folks. I don't think that I've seen any more come in. So Kim, I know you also sent the invitation for folks to message you directly. So if you've received a question, please let me know. But anyone else, if you would like to share a question in the chat, please do so now, or you can raise a hand and I'll get you a spot.
Yeah. I can jump in. This is Kim speaking. You mentioned, Erin, earlier about, I believe it's the Arts Education for All Act that was once again reintroduced by Representative Bonamici, if I'm correct. Could you tell us more about that? What does the scope of that look like? And what's the status of that bill?
Yeah, it's a good question in terms of status. I think, one of the things that I'm definitely trying to make sure that Americans for the Arts is more focused on is just not the appropriations, but the actual, deep investment in helping to advance federal policy, and to be more proactive in terms of, sort of writing that legislation. Representative Boamici is an incredible advocate for arts education. So I think it's just a question of, getting additional sponsors and additional, folks on the Hill to also be champions of that.
Yes, then to follow up on that, what can we do to help? We're at the roundtable. I think folks that have engaged with us over time see that we love to be action oriented. We like when there's research done, we like to say, great, how can we use this to better support our field, our workforce? So if you were to sort of give some next action steps for this group, I know you've covered a lot of ground as it relates to funding, policy, higher education. Sort of you can pick what springs to mind immediately, but what are things folks can do right now to be able to support our field more broadly?
I don't have any magic thing other than to keep showing up and to keep doing the work, maybe do it a little louder and a little bigger. But I think the main thing is just to stay the course and to continue to be, committed in the ways that I know all of us are. I think it's important this can be discouraging, but I think it's important to stay engaged. And in whatever ways you can build coalition with other advocates, people that are also working in the community, there's certainly strength in numbers. So I think finding your community and then expanding that community, I think is important. And, continue to stay updated. I mean, there will be, I think focus moments, certainly in the upcoming years for, us to move in concert on certain issues. So making sure that you're, staying abreast and connected to, not only AFTA, but your state level advocacy organization, your local level advocacy organization to get those cues when it's time to move together.
Thanks, Erin. I'll name that at the roundtable side, if folks are interested at the state levels, organizations that we partner with quite a bit are Arts New York State, New Yorkers for Culture and Arts as well as our partners at the New York State Alliance for Arts Education. All links I will pop in the chat once I ask Sonnet's question. Hi, Sonnet. She poses, do you know what's going on with the peer review process at National Endowment for the Arts, National Endowment for Humanities, Institute of Museum and Library Services?
My understanding is that the peer review process at the National Endowment for the Arts is still going forward. I believe it's even required by statute, but I could be totally wrong about that. So don't quote me, but I think that's my understanding. But I think, we're lucky that we have, I think, some stable and really focused leadership at the National Endowment for the Arts. That believes in the arts and is, cares about the agency and is, trying to move good things forward. I think what will happen at the NEH, and IMLS is a little bit, I think, to be determined as they, I think, work through some of the, challenges of understanding how to function within this context.
I did get a private question. This is Kim. I can spotlight. As various funding sources dry up, we feel the impact deeply, and many people feel like the nonprofit model is broken. Are you seeing any different models, whether that be public-private partnership, collaboration, etc., that help organizations feel on more stable footing and offer staff more livable wages?
Well, I'm one of those people that not to say that the model is broken, but it certainly needs we need more models that really, I think, acknowledge the different ways that arts show up in communities and the different ways that different communities participate in the arts. Like, it is a very one-dimensional sort of a solution for what is a very diverse and varied sort of ecosystem. So, I am certainly heartened by, things that are happening to increase the types of business models that we're looking at, from for-profit models to cooperative models to shared ownership models, even fiscal receivership in some cases, just giving people more variety of options. But the reality is that if we start to establish those different models on the other side, the sort of funding ecosystem and support ecosystem needs to grow to support that as well. And so, thinking about what needs to happen from, sort of the philanthropic side to the, individual or sort of corporation side to also meet, right, the potential growth in all of those other areas is something that I don't think we've quite figured out, but it's something we should pay attention to in terms of, just really sort of diversifying the mechanisms in terms of how the arts are supported.
Great. And I realized, David Chickoff, I missed your physical hand earlier if it's something that you want to come off mute and ask, but I also see you put something in the chat, so I'll give you a moment if you'd like to come off mute.
Thank you. And thank you, Erin, for all this. It's terrific. But my question is just simply, in addition to the restoration of funding for NEA and NEH, I mean, can you give us some other reassuring specific news about wins? You alluded to that earlier in your talk. What's the good news here?
Well, I think there's a lot of good, I'm traveling the country all of the time. Let's just spend the majority of my time with folks in community. And I think the good news is that the work is still continuing, even in some extreme and hard circumstances. I think that's the thing that is most inspiring and hopeful for me, is just that people are good and the work is continuing. I'm always really heartened by, the amount of, I think, bipartisan support for the arts that there is. One of my favorite statistics is that, 76% of Americans believe that the arts are personally important to them. And the fact that, the National Endowment for the Arts and the National Endowment for the Humanities was one of the few one of the few federal departments that didn't receive any cuts last year is pretty extraordinary. So I think that we're in a good position to continue to advocate for those agencies and even to sort of increase funding, and I think a modest way in coming in 2027.
Thank you for that question, David. And I feel like that the wins is a great place to leave this with. So I just want to thank everyone for being here today, especially Erin. Thank you so much for spending this time with us, especially this extended chance to really be in dialogue together with you. So grateful for that. I also want to give one more big thank you to Hinu Josephine for opening our conference with such a beautiful song sharing. And folks, this is, like I said, just the beginning. I'm thrilled that we were able to open the conference with this vital conversation, and I hope that there is a lot for you to take away and continue to chew on, especially as you engage with the conference content and are able to connect both virtually and hopefully in person with our community over the next 2 weeks. Just a quick reminder that we have lots of sessions coming up this week that are free and welcome, open to all. So you have those 6 sessions listed here. I believe Kim also put links and information in the chat for the 2 sessions that we have coming up tomorrow. Those are listed here. First, tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern, we have a new lens on differentiation, tailoring arts integration to engage and inspire every learner. And then tomorrow afternoon at 4 p.m., we have Parent Power for Cultural Equity, galvanizing the power of families through advocacy and community-led research. So I really hope you can join us for both of those. Like I said, all session recordings will be shared with folks virtually via email after the conference. And I think we have the links in the chat. Think that is going to do it for us. So thank you all again for joining us to kick off the keynote, or to kick off the conference with this wonderful keynote with Erin. And we will hopefully be seeing you all very soon. Thanks, everyone.